Welcome to the expansion chamber. I don't remember what episode number we're on, but it's an episode number. I'm joined here today by two very special guests, Tony and Dustin. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
I'm Tony Cowden, owner, founder of Capable Incorporated. It is mostly a firearms type training company. Special operations background, Army, SF, worked over at the Intel Agency. Been doing that sort of stuff for 27 years now. But yeah, nowadays spending most of my time training regular old people to shoot better and just be better physically, more prepared.
And Dustin?
I'm Dustin. I started doing more and more with Tony over the last year or two. First Ranger Battalion veteran, 2001 to 2012. Towards the end of that, I went over to the Ranger Regiment. So a lot of time overseas, and then a lot of shooting experience in different ways in the civilian world too. So we've kind of pieced together the best of both worlds and developed some what we think is pretty valuable stuff for the people who come to our classes out here, and putting a lot more stuff on the calendar coming up over the beginning of the next year, and really looking forward to it.
Awesome. So obviously something right now that we see in the news is what's going on in Israel and how we're seeing it kind of affect us domestically, whether we're going to go to war, whether something like that could happen in the United States. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Without taking sides, I've got to guess there's tens of thousands of extremists in the U.S. just waiting for one more thing to trigger them, or to get a command from someone over there. Just in the last few days, I've seen protest, actually peaceful, not just saying peaceful, but protest in the Raleigh area and a few other areas, in the hundreds. And could those people be, again, not even mentioning the sides, could any of those people be triggered to take action, especially if the U.S. gets more and more vocal about what side they support over there? Definitely. Most people aren't prepared for it.
Yeah, you know, I, I'm very clear whether we're talking about the United States or Israel or any other superpower, or we could be talking about Japan right now. Superpowers are not innocent in the way they affect others around them. However, and I say this emphatically, you can do, right, let's face it, if we're just unbiased, step back and analyze the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with no bias. And that's difficult to do as a human being, right? And I guarantee people who watch this are going to hear me say this and disregard what I just said. Sheerly analytical from an analyst perspective, right? Americans are not good analysts. We allow our emotions and our bias to affect it. So we try to remove that. As an unconventional warfare guy from Army Special Forces, that is our mission. You can conduct guerrilla, unconventional, or even insurgency warfare without committing war crimes, without chopping babies' heads off, without kidnapping civilians, right? You can still, as an underdog, an unconventional fighting force, attack infrastructure, military installations, right? But that's not what we're seeing, and that is the problem with terrorism, and that's what makes Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, Al Qaeda. That's what separates freedom fighters, right, with a cause, from terrorist organizations. These What they've done in these last few days have been terror operations.
Absolutely.
No matter where you stand on either side, if you can condone attacking innocent people who are just simply a race or a part of a population, right? They're not combatants. They didn't swear an oath to protect. They're not wearing a uniform. Well, you're a fucking terrorist, and that's a cowardly way of doing business. And I hate to call war a business, but I mean it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Palestinians, right? Israel is not free of blame from the way they have treated the Palestinians. However, every time they give them something, this is the type of thing that happens, right? And so I feel like, Hamas just continues, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah, or you can, with, of course, Iranian and Syrian support, direct support.
Yep.
I mean, we're seeing weapons that we left in Afghanistan
Showing
right
up
now. All of a sudden, they've made it through a couple of countries fairly easily.
Yep.
It's not hard to transport, if you're Hamas or Hezbollah's weapons through or from Afghanistan, through Iran, through Iraq, Syria, and then obviously even into Lebanon and then Israel. So yeah, man, you just cannot condone terrorism, and we're seeing it. Like I saw where Black Lives Matter is like, oh, we stand with Palestine. There's one thing to stand with Palestine and Palestinians and support human rights. But to support Hamas and what they've been doing over the last couple of days,
These protests, they're carrying swastikas.
And people's argument might be, hey, we've dropped plenty of bombs that have killed civilians. Israel's launched plenty of missiles that killed civilians, but it's impossible to not have some collateral damage, even if you're strictly attacking a military target. The difference is we're not individually targeting groups of civilians.
Oh, just on purpose, yeah.
Unless you're Obama.
Bringing up small arms on civilians and purposely continuing to engage them.
Right.
When the military target or military threat is not part of that firefight.
Well, and Hamas and Hezbollah and terrorist organizations tend to, and in this case they are, hiding amongst the civilian population. And that's part of the game of unconventional warfare. And again, the separation is when you start attacking innocents, right? Now you're a terrorist organization.
And I feel like when you have the idea of a freedom fighter, right, going back obviously to our history, the Revolutionary War, the occupying force were the British, and they were in what we considered our land, right? And we want to separate from them. But the IDF and like people from Israel are not allowed into Palestine, right? Into the holy, even their own holy sites. So it's an incursion into. So I don't see how you can make the argument of freedom fighter when you're invading another nation. I mean, you can say, oh, we're trying to liberate people. That's not their argument. Their argument is that we're trying to take everything ultimately, right? And that's the dirty secret that no one in the media or no one wants to say is their goal is to eradicate everyone in Israel and take it over for,
Yeah, and it's kind of sad because propaganda and the lies surrounding like the Arab and Israeli relationship throughout history. People say, oh, well, they've been fighting for thousands of years. That's actually not true. If you look throughout history, Muslims oftentimes referred to their Zionist brothers. They lived together peacefully. And then at the end of World War II, Britain, not the U.S., screwed over the Arab leader, which, if I'm not mistaken, his last name was Hussein at the time. They promised him so much. And then Brits turned around and gave Lebanon to France and basically went back on their deal and created, and then we said, okay, we're creating a nation of Israel after we've made all these promises to the Arab leaders who had sided with us against the Nazis. We double-crossed them and we created Israel, or allowed Israel to be created. And that initiated, 1948 was the first modern war between Arabs and Palestinians and Arabs. The West created that. How do we fix it is the question. Well, for the past, almost 100 years now, 80 years now, there's been no real effort to fix the problem. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, it's obviously outside my scope. Yeah. It's not my area of study. I haven't worked in Israel or Palestine, obviously. So I don't know all the geopolitics that go into it. But I don't know that there is a solution to this conflict.
I think it's always like a staying sort of effect. I think there's a reason we're seeing all these conflicts erupt around the globe now under our current administration, when a couple of years ago, things like the Abraham Accords, how much did they mean? But the fact that they were signed, it all meant something, right? All these things, somehow Trump gets brought into everything, but under him, I feel like this isn't something we would have seen, right? He moved the embassy, he did all these things, whether they were just gestures or they actually meant something.
Well, here's a dynamic you don't hear about often, right? The Arab Muslim world doesn't give a shit about the Palestinians. They don't do anything for them until it's time to attack Israel. And then all of a sudden you've got the Iranians, which, obviously Muslim Persian world, intervening.
Yeah.
We've seen sometimes some of the Muslim Arab world doing some, but my point is they forsake the Palestinians. They're not doing much of anything,
Yeah.
right? Like, when was the last time you heard of Saudi Arabia giving billions to build infrastructure in Gaza or something like that? It just isn't happening. At least not to my knowledge, right? Again, not by any means close to an expert on that region and the geopolitics that go in there. But, at the reality is in the hierarchy of where the Arab world sees the Palestinians, they're at the bottom.
Oh, yeah, they only care when it's convenient.
Right. So the thing that Trump was doing well was bringing the Arab world together to support the Palestinians. So now they're taking care of themselves, building the infrastructure and all the things that the Palestinians have not been able to do, create, or source on themselves. So it's just a huge drop.
Yeah.
What scares me about all this is, we've got Turkey aiding the Palestinians. Turkey's a NATO member,
Yep.
right?
Supposedly.
That needs to be, right, supposedly, that needs to be addressed. Seriously addressed. We just shot down an armed Turkish drone in Syria because that drone was too close to our forces there. We need to make Turkey decide what side they're on and then treat them accordingly.
Absolutely.
But to me, what's really scary is, man, all this time, man, the Chinese involvement in the entire global destabilization, and that's what we're looking at. And here's another fact we need to keep in mind. Human beings have been at war since human beings have been on this planet. There's never been a time of world peace, not ever, period. You cannot find a year on this planet that was not a huge group versus another group fighting.
Yep.
Period. So I don't think that's going to change because that's just our nature. The world is huge. Neighbors are going to fuss. But right now, around the world, I really, for the first time in my adult life, I feel like we're one bad mistake, one natural disaster, plus a bad mistake between bumbling idiots that are running our country and others, World War III.
We've never been closer.
I don't think so.
World War
It's
II.
scary. We have nuclear powers at each other's throats, whether it be proxy in Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's a weird time, man.
And you have.
And it's scary because Israel has some very competent leaders and a very capable intelligence agency, one of the best intelligence agencies in the world.
And they just had a huge failure.
And they picked up no clues of this, no hints. And if you look at who we have above us,
Right.
It could be very, very easily someone could be planning something right now.
Our intelligence mechanism has been broken for a long time.
Completely complacent, and it scares me.
Yeah, if they can pull one over on Israel and like Netanyahu, and that dude's been squared away for a long time, and they're aggressive with their intelligence gathering. Like Dustin just
especially
said.
because Israel has that one little area they got to focus on here and there as a possible threat. Like 90% of their defense focus and intelligence is probably focused on threats there, and they still didn't pick it up.
And they're they have so much to deal with because they're surrounded by people that don't like them. Imagine if Canada and Mexico every other day were talking about invading us. Now they want to kill all the Americans, And that's essentially what Israel deals with.
I went to our southern. We went to our southern border last year. We're being invaded.
Oh, absolutely.
By a bunch of different countries.
Oh yeah, people think illegal immigrant. They think some guy from Mexico,
Honduras,
mowing the yard.
Venezuela.
But you have Russians, Ukrainians, Chinese, all sorts of different people
Iranians,
overstaying their visas.
Yeah.
Who is it? Was it Alex Stein or was it what's the other guy from who used to be at Project Veritas? You know what I'm talking about? He does the undercover stuff. Anyways, he dressed up as in a terrorist costume at the border, and they let him through. They watched him and they didn't do anything about it, and it's he dressed up like Osama bin Laden basically, and I can't remember his name.
Can't profile. Law enforcement can't profile, bro.
Oh, yeah.
The Border Patrol has been turned off.
Oh,
they're shut down. They are now border crossing facilitators. They're farriers. You know what I mean? They're literally helping people across. We saw the videos of our Border Patrol removing barricades that Texas put up. Violate your oath much, fellas?
Yeah, no,
Hey,
it's,
Border Patrol.
And they're not allowed to talk about it or document anything. We met up with people. Hey, you can't mention my name. You can't show my face. Don't even acknowledge being here. We're not supposed to do any video of this. And nothing on their part was, what's
Yeah.
the word I'm looking for? They were afraid to have on video. It's just,
Yeah.
they're not even allowed to acknowledge the flow of people coming over there. It's just like mute. Don't shut up. Don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Don't
For-
acknowledge it. Don't anything.
Yeah. For
It's
context
just-
of what Dustin's talking about, is a friend of mine is a Border Patrol agent on the Texas border, and he agreed to meet us some 30 or 40 miles away from his work area so no one would see him meeting us. We sat down and had lunch in like the back room of a little restaurant, so no one could see us. And like you said, he basically acknowledged everything that's being said. He hates his job, but he's close to retirement. He's in a pinch.
yeah.
You know what I mean? He can't go out on his own and stop the flow across the border. He was like, yeah, basically they come across, we take them to the detainment facility. They might stay a couple of days, and they're on buses or planes, poof, all around the nation.
Yep.
And I mean, this was what, a year and a half ago when we were there, so it's only gotten worse.
Absolutely. Well, now they're bringing back the wall. It only took
Sections of it or
It
something.
only took them like 4 years, and they're like, oh,
you
maybe.
know, in some of the budget arguments they were having recently, there was funding in there for walls in other countries,
Yeah.
walls and fences and security at borders for other
Yeah.
countries. And when asked about it, do you feel a wall in this country is important for their security? Yes, but why are we voting against a wall in our?
I don't believe in coincidence. And if it was just a couple of hiccups from our administration and our government, but when we see on every different layer, on every different subject, a favoritism towards nations other than our own, that's not a coincidence. That's an orchestrated, designed effort. And whether it's making sure China's can import and we cannot export, or name a product. Hell, I just saw where Ford is about to import their electric vehicles that they've been having manufactured in China.
Yeah, the new
Ford Motor
Ford
Company.
Lightning or whatever.
Yeah. It's like, are you kidding? Ford's making cars in China? Who facilitated that, And don't get me wrong, man. There's all kinds of problems with American manufacturing, unions making it too expensive to work here or build things here. I get all that. But when everything favors China, that's not a coincidence. We look at the fentanyl that's being made in Mexico by Chinese chemists. It's all documented and proven. This isn't conspiracy theories. This isn't made up stuff.
Yeah.
We cannot dismiss this administration's actions as incompetence. Does the president appear to be incompetent? Certainly. But he's still the president, should or shall be held accountable. But like every other president who, freaking violated their oath to the Constitution and to their service, he'll die unprosecuted.
Yeah.
And we've had a few over the last 40 years.
Yeah. I think there's a chance, simply not because it's the right thing, but maybe he'll get prosecuted to get rid of him and bring someone else in.
But who's
Like-
next
That's
after
it.
him?
Well, Harris.
It's worse,
Right.
So
Well,
that's-
I'm sure they'll find some loophole to push through who they really want, or maybe just for the nomination for 2024. Because I don't see how you run Biden in 2024. I don't see it.
I didn't see him running freaking in the last election, but they
Well,
did.
this is what's interesting to
Yeah.
me about I wasn't fully surprised, but this is what's weird. Biden did not announce until after Trump started all those investigations in Ukraine. Then all of a sudden, we're investigating all this corruption in Ukraine. Oh, Biden's not running for president. Why are you investigating your political rival? He wasn't his rival. Now he's his rival. Now he's running for president. It's like something had to be covered up, and now all of a sudden we're involved in Ukraine in a war. So I feel like ultimately it comes to some grand corruption, because I think a lot of times there's this idea. I think there's two factions. There's the people that just care about themselves and their own power and furthering their own goals, and then the people who are being influenced by other nations who want to destroy the United States. So when you have people who only care about themselves and furthering their own goals and ideas, like the Biden family, and then you have people infiltrating from other countries, other nations, from terrorist organizations getting into our government. you combine those two things, it's
and
really
then
easy.
influencing the Biden.
Yeah, it's really easy to
and
destroy
folks like that,
to destroy the United States. You know, when you
Yeah.
have Chinese spies sleeping with congressmen, you know,
And nothing being done about it.
yeah,
Nothing. Saul
yeah.
Yeah, that dude should be in
Who
prison.
wants to nuke the United States population? By the way, for owning guns, you know, great
Yeah.
guy.
Man, you know, obviously, I stuck my face in the ass of politics when I ran for Congress, and obviously challenging an incumbent Republican. I have lost faith in not just our government, but most importantly, the people that are in it. I mean, a fellow Republican, you know, treated me and my entire campaign, my campaign staff, with so much disrespect. Didn't have the balls to sit down. I mean, spineless. I'll say it, right? Our representative, or so-called representative, Greg Murphy here in this district, is a spineless piece of shit. I mean, didn't have the balls. Such a coward that he wouldn't sit down and debate a knuckle dragger like myself, right? He's a clown. You know, they're puppets.
Absolutely.
A puppet from Kevin McCarthy, who just got ousted. My take on American politics is it's busted, and there's only two ways of fixing it. Is there still a peaceful way? Absolutely, because conservatives still outnumber wacky ass liberals 3-1 in the United States.
Just most of them are too lazy to even go and vote.
Right. The most important thing to the average, good, hardworking conservative right now is making sure their kids get to soccer practice or whatever, right? And that's important. But the reality is, if we continue to focus on things that have traditionally been important to conservative people, it's only going to get worse. If 70% of the moderate conservative to conservative America actually stood up and got involved, we could change it. We could oust all these dirtbag pieces of shit like Greg Murphy and pretty much every other congressperson. At this point right now, if you gave me the option to fire every single congressperson, but I could choose one to stay in power, it would be Eli Crane, right? From Arizona, first, Navy SEAL. He's the only one that's even upholding his promises. He promised he would never vote for McCarthy as Speaker, and twice now he hasn't done it. Every single other Republican that said they would never vote for McCarthy caved. They caved. And they made excuses for caving. They made up lies for caving. What changed from January to now is Kevin McCarthy freaking somehow or another convinced them to support him. Well, they can't exchange direct favors, so it's always something sinister and scandalous, So I think we're screwed because I don't think Americans. I think it's going to have to get a lot worse for the average American to get off their lazy asses, quit shoving McDonald's in their face, and get involved. Get involved.
And
right?
getting involved is as simple as voting. Like, so many people just don't vote. Like, it's crazy if you look at the numbers of people who can vote and
or
people who
don't vote for the same assholes that are in, reelect no one.
Yeah.
Period.
They reelect dead people.
Right. Like, stop voting for these people. If they've been in office more than 2 terms, out. Like, and even right now, it should just be like, you know what? Screw it. Let's start over.
Yeah.
As much as I consider Eli to be squared away and stuff, again, if you gave me the option, you said, hey, man, you can make it where no one in the Senate, House, or all the way down to local government gets reelected next term, I would say, you know what? Send Eli home too. Send them all home, man. Let's get all new blood. Of course, it requires term limits.
Yeah.
Making stock trading illegal for all elected people and their family members. And that verbiage would have to be written better because, not just family members, you know what I mean? I don't want to get you to set up, an account, and we're still trading. We have to make sure that stuff stops. And lobbying. Lobbying is the most detrimental thing to the institution that is the United States government.
Well, and the way we've set
or
it
even
up,
your state government.
You have like someone like McCarthy up until just now, who they just have to lobby him, and that's it.
That's
They
it.
have just have to focus on McCarthy. They don't have to appeal to any states anymore. They just had to focus on McCarthy. If they got McCarthy's win, it's all that mattered. And so I will applaud like Matt Gaetz, who really was the sole one. Like a lot of these other Republicans were like, "Oh, we're going to hold McCarthy responsible. We elected him, we'll hold him responsible." They were silent. Only Matt Gaetz really, and a couple others were like, "No, he actually broke his promise.
We're
We
gonna
gave
hold him to it.
him time. We're gonna hold him to it. So
And I'll tell you straight up, I don't believe that Matt Gaetz is completely without ulterior motive.
absolutely,
I mean, there's no doubt in my
No
mind
one-
Matt Gaetz wants to be speaker. He wants something, but at least he's saying and doing the right things.
yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know, man. And I really do try hard. I've tried to remove myself from paying attention to politics because there's nothing positive about it. There's nothing exciting about it. I tell people all the time, people keep asking, are you going to run again? And I'm like, no. And they're like, why not? I'm like, because you and the rest of your family freaking were not involved at all. Right? You want me to go bust my ass to represent you, but you don't want to get involved. So until the American population is ready to get involved, the system is set up against, guys like me. Freaking, I don't have $1 million of my own money to put in an account and stuff like that. The system is set up to make sure we, the common folk, the peasants, don't run for the House of Representatives, and certainly not Senate. Right?
Yeah.
Senate is for the elites, but the House of Representatives was supposed to be for the commoners, right?
Yeah.
Like it was modeled after
The House of Commons.
The House of Commons,
Yeah.
The commoners. But we've forgotten that, the regular American person has forgotten that. They treat their congresspersons like they're some type of celebrity.
Yeah.
And that's so backwards. They're supposed to work for us. They're not supposed to, like, you see all these congresspersons like releasing these statements on Israel. There's nowhere in the Constitution that says a damn thing about a congressperson or a representative looking at foreign policy. It's not their jobs. It's not their jobs. Like the Constitution does expressly say that if it does not give the federal government the power, it is left to the states. And nowhere in that Constitution does it say, all right, that the Congress has anything to do with foreign policy. So I don't give a shit what my representative thinks about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Like, can you fix the economy? Maybe.
I want you to make sure Oregon Inlet is open and operational, so our fishermen can get in and out and make a living.
Yeah.
Things like that. I want you to tell me that you just brokered a deal with Toyota to bring a 8,000 employee manufacturing facility to New Bern, North Carolina. I want to hear that stuff from my congressperson. But that's not what we get.
Well, I feel like that's no longer. It's weird. Everyone talks about the economy, but no one has like a focus on the things that will help the economy. Like it's still all about this is what's going on in Ukraine and Israel. And there is an aspect of, okay, we need to stop sending money over there and reinvest it. But I feel eventually it's like, okay, let's talk about but it's just these empty, hollow ideas.
It's horrible.
There's no like, oh, let's do this or do that.
Yeah.
So, and I think we can go on all day about this, but why don't we go to a slightly less bleak and depressing topic? Shooting. So a big thing that, a lot of people obviously want to train, want to get better. And there's this big thing from the tactical community that competition shooting is really dangerous. It's going to get you killed in the streets. You're going to die a horrible death because you once shot a competition.
Who says that? Right? It's typically two types of people. Tactical shooters who have either never shot competition or they shot one, they got their doors blown off, right? But probably by some overweight woman. They got their ego hurt and they don't learn enough about competition to understand what it can do for the quote unquote tactical shooter. Of course, my next question is, what is a tactical shooter? What does that mean? Has anyone ever even bothered to find that, right? Like, what is a tactical shooter?
I think it's the confusion of shooting and other things and always melding it together. Like, shooting can never just stand on its own, right? It always has to be, shooting and moving or tactical shoot. It's like, no, there's tactics and there's shooting. You can have tactics with a gun, with a knife, with your hands.
Right.
That doesn't require a gun for that to be tactics. The only thing that requires a gun is shooting.
Somebody threatens you, you can draw your pistol or you could run away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those are tactics.
You can scream loudly.
To me, it's a moot point. And when I hear someone say that competition will get you killed in the street, I'm like, I don't even want to entertain the conversation. It's such a stupid conversation to me. If I were to go and set up a stage, like a USPSA stage, and then, right, we said, okay, you got your walls and your barrels or whatever, the barricades, right, the visual barricades. And I said, okay, now treat those walls as if you have cover, right? It actually becomes much easier, right? We run up to the edge of the wall, then we lean out and we shoot. Well, in USPSA, you got to come into that position, hit those targets, and leave that position, and get to another position and do it again. And each time, shoot, 90+% alphas.
Yeah.
So when guys say that competition is somehow not helpful or it'll get you killed in the street, it's assuming two things: the competition is somehow easier or requires less of a human being performance-wise, which is incorrect. Let's face it, there are a lot of super top GM guys out there that wouldn't last, 5 minutes in a real gunfight. Because in a real gunfight, like, when people think of it as like CQB or something like that, especially, if you ain't got the 5 top GMs in USPSA and you ain't got 5 Rangers and put them in CQB, the Rangers are destroying them. Why? Because they work together a team. They're doing tactics, whereas those GMs won't know that stuff, right? Unless they somehow had private training or something like that. Just no tactical background, USPSA GM versus 5 Rangers, right? They're losing to those Rangers because they work together as a team. They understand tactics, CQB, that sort of stuff. Or just put them in the woods, right? Put them in the woods or the desert or anywhere that fire and maneuver, which falls under another umbrella of tactics. And obviously they're crushing them, right?
Yeah.
So it's I don't know. It's just kind of a dumb argument that I can't believe even still exists in this day and time.
All the time.
Yeah, I ignore it because I don't care. I'm like,
I mean, if you have a real threat, what goes into getting accurate shots to stop the threat? If you have a handgun, obviously the draw. If you've already got the handgun out, or you've got a carbine, whatever term you want to use, the presentation, getting from here to sights on target, maybe shooting while moving into a position, or shooting while moving out of a position of cover, concealment, and whatever. Maybe shooting on move, maybe shooting from an awkward position. All that stuff is things you got to perfect in both competition and real world stuff, real world shooting, real world engagements. None of it. There's not one thing that doesn't apply. Of course, if I'm shooting a USPSA stage or 3-gun stage, I'm going from point A to B to C as quick as I want. Whereas in real life, hey, after I fired from point B, I might assess what I'm going to do for a few seconds and scan something before moving up. But when it comes to running your gun, getting quick and effective shots on target, it's all interchangeable. And like you said, you're lacking the communication part and the fire maneuver part if you had multiple people. But if you look at the aspect of what it takes to get shots on a threat to protect yourself or protect your family, it's the same skills that you use to get accurate shots on targets during a competition.
I always like to use this point with the tactical guys. They're like, you got to train tactical, and you got to, use cover. In USPSA and shooting competitions, they're not even using cover. And then that exact same tactical dude is posting 9 out of 10 videos standing perfectly squared off at a target on a flat range with no cover, right? At 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, and 25 yards only. Right, those are the only distances tactical gunfights happen, right?
3 yards and in.
And they're actually just sitting there shooting a paper target. They call it working on the fundamentals. And I'm like, but you just said you were a tactical shooter, and tactical shooting must use cover and movement and all those things, but yet you set up, and we see it like in the military, right? Yeah. 40, 50 dudes all shooting a target, and there's no cover to be found anywhere.
So we can call competition working on the fundamentals really, really fast and
right.
dynamically.
Yeah.
I'm dynamically working on the fundamentals. That's what I'm doing.
Got to use the word dynamic.
Match.
You got to throw maybe dynamic, biomechanics,
kinesthetic awareness.
Yes.
Hey, look, if you can't spell a word, don't use it in a sentence.
Maybe because more and more people are getting on social media, seeing other instructors making money running courses, and everyone thinks they can do it. A big reason why you don't see most instructors entering a competition just to have fun. We're not saying you got to go to a competition and be dominant to be a good instructor or win it, but you should be able to go to a competition and be in the top 10 or 20% and move efficiently and shoot efficiently. But the reason most won't do it is because most instructors really cannot shoot or articulate much. And when you perfect 4 or 5 drills that you always run in your classes and you run on video, even a mediocre shooter can get pretty damn proficient at those drills and look pretty high speed on video, especially if you're only showing your best runs. So I can take nobody, a mediocre to below average shooter, and start running El Prez with him, 222 reload 222 for a few days, and by the time we're done with it, I guarantee I could record him and have him looking pretty bad ass during that drill. Or what's another popular one? The X drill, 2 to the body, 2 to the head, 2 to the head, 2 to the body.
Or like the Mozambique.
A
all
few
those
different names.
drills.
If,
I guess you're not supposed to call it that
if you rehearse
What do they call it
that,
now?
I think it's like the stop the threat or some.
Oh, the Mozambique.
Yeah,
You're
you're not supposed to call it the Mozambique. You have to call it like the stop the threat or something like that, or like
failure drill.
failure to stop or something.
Which is kind
there's
of
nothing wrong
drill.
with the drill, but if you rehearse that drill,
Yeah.
and that's what you spend a couple hours on every class, that's what you're showing in most of your videos, even a mediocre shooter can look.
Because
Right.
at that
Do
point,
well.
it's repetitions doing one really simple thing.
Yeah. Well, and you shot our pistol course, man. Freaking, we don't do any specific drills, at least not famous drills like El Prez or something, right? We focus on on-demand shooting, right? And because we always say this: if you're presented with 3 bad guys before the gunfight happens, what are you going to do? Hey, guys, do you mind coming up? Everybody get online. I'm going to need you to stand exactly 1 meter apart, center to center, like I'm used to training on the flat range tactically.
Yeah.
Well, in my experience, you don't get bad guys to do what you'd like for them to do. They stand where they want. They stand behind what they want. They do all kinds of crazy stuff because they're the most important factor in the gunfight, right? Well, that's not how most people train. So it's got to be on demand. There's a target. All the variables in that situation draw get rounds on target right now, all right? Well, guess what? In shooting competitions, you show up. You don't put the targets where you want, right? The director or whoever designed the stages did all that. And you have to be able to shoot them on demand very quickly and very accurately to be competitive.
With some pressure on you, and
Absolutely.
you can't shoot at each other.
It's
in
only
real life
self-pressure.
for training.
Yeah.
So being on a timer with people watching and having to shoot on demand is the best way to put pressure on
Competition.
yourself.
It's so stressful because you have all these people. You might have your friends or your buddies watching you, and then you have strangers watching you.
So, I mean, there are tactical shooting competitions out there, right?
Yes.
The Dustin 3 gun's a good one. All kinds of physical stuff. And there have been very famous tactical shooters that showed up and quit because they couldn't do the physical stuff, right? So, how important is physicality, this and that. Here's an unpopular thing, and it's going to sound counter to a lot of what we just said. We are all about the high-performing shooting, right? I want my students to have a roadmap when they leave my courses to go become the best they could possibly ever be. But here's a reality that a lot of guys like us in this space, we're always talking about training high-performance standards, training to the worst-case scenario and all that. There is not one single piece, not one shred of evidence, not one video out there that supports that the average shooter needs to be even a master level shooter, much less a grandmaster shooter. And that's a reality. Now, I'm not, again, let me say out loud again that I'm not somehow perpetuating the idea that you can just suck with a firearm, right? Yes, we want to be the best possible in case we do meet, right? The dude who is robbing you at the ATM is a former USPSA shooter.
Karen Butler lost all his money. Now he mugs
You know
people.
what I mean? Like, man, like JJ Racaza freaking has gone on a heroin binge and is now mugging you at the ATM, right? Freaking,
You're fine.
It just doesn't happen like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the reality is there are a lot of people out there purveying performance standards that are simply higher than required for the most common gunfight that we see in America today. The self-defense gunfight, the mugging, the carjacking. And there's actually a lot of evidence out there to support the opposite. The liquor store or the convenience store clerk who's never shot a gun before, the first time they shoot it, they pull out some revolver. Doesn't even belong to them. It belongs to the store owner, and they win a gunfight. Now, again, or hell, we can use police officers. Why do police officers suck with firearms? Well, because their culture doesn't support, their leadership doesn't support high levels of training.
Yeah.
But it's based off of a requirement that the average police officer wins their gunfight simply because the little bit of training that they did have made them better than the asshole that's trying to hurt them.
You know, and you have, because a lot of times people also talk about, oh, well, this person's been in a gunfight, so they know what you're talking about. And it's like, I can find you 30 gangbangers who've shot someone or killed people who have won a gunfight, and they don't know what the hell they're doing.
Right.
They just happen to win. And a lot of times law enforcement wins because of numbers. You know, there might be one or two gangbangers, but when every officer from that whole county shows up, obviously we know who's
volume of fire.
Yeah.
Right.
So
and when the first cop shoots, everybody's shooting.
Yeah. But
you gotta think the difference between a national level, like top 3 grandmaster shooter, and someone just somewhat proficient, 20 or 30%. So if we're talking about a skill that takes 2 seconds, that's a 0.4 difference. If we're talking about a draw and fire however many shots, or we're talking about engaging 3 targets, so we're talking about 0.4 for something like that. Situational awareness and just making a quick decision is a second or two, versus 0.4. Yeah. So that's the important thing. Situational awareness and making a decision is going to gain you a lot more time than
how fast your draw is.
Than trying to achieve GM status, but then going out and having your head up your ass. So.
And let's face it, right? Like the buzzer. We all train with them, right? Yeah. We should train with them. It's just like, have you ever bet a track coach that doesn't use a stopwatch to train their athletes? Of course, it's our stopwatch. So we should use it. Most people don't know how to use it very well. They just look at the last number and then try to go faster. But that's a different topic. That buzzer going off, right? That GM, that master, even that A-class shooter has gotten so used to that buzzer going off. Let's say, typically speaking, a pack time of the buzzer from the beginning with the B to the P of beep is 0.33 of a second, right? And most A-class or better shooters, when that buzzer goes off, right, their gun's already coming out of the holster by the end of the 0.33, right? Or at least their hand is on it, the gun is moving. May not have cleared the holster yet, right? But that's because they're conditioned to a buzzer, right? If you give me a scenario with real people, right, or force on force or something like that, where it's not obvious that it's a threat, it's a compound situation, I have to think, right? I'm not conditioned to that stimuli. Why? Because I've never seen it before.
Yeah. And
that's one truth I know about gunfights. Every single one you get in is a lot different than the last one. And so, to kind of back up to your thing that like, oh, this guy got in a gunfight. And we make jokes at our in our classes that if you get in a gunfight, you want to make sure it's caught on CCTV. So you start a tactical training company. I survived a gunfight, right? Like the police officer who survived a gunfight on the side of the road now starts a tactical shooting company. Well, they didn't survive because they're good. They survived because the dude they were fighting sucked, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a reality of the situation. We make fun of a lot of things. I do. I'm a sarcastic type person in nature anyway. It just, and you know what, we were talking about this yesterday when we were on the range. You have to define the requirements of your training. I don't care if it's lifting weights, running, shooting. What are the requirements of your discipline? And I think the tactical shooting community, right, when it comes to competition, it is easy, very easy to define the requirements, right? The requirements of shooting USPSA or 3-gun. We can sit down and write out the 10 things that you will see in every single stage you ever shoot, right? Those are your requirements. Those are the things you're going to go work on. Well, you can do the same thing for the tactical engagement. You may have to bracket a little bit, and I think this is where tactical shooters screw up. there is so much out there in the civilian space that has like gotten drug out of the CQB space. Well, most gunfights in America don't happen in CQB spaces. They happen in, what are they calling it now? Tranny spaces. Not spaces where you find trannies, but transitional spaces.
Yeah.
And when I say tranny, I don't mean like the mentally ill people, right? I mean like transitions, right?
Yeah.
Moving from one thing to another.
The supermarket
Yeah.
to the parking garage.
Yeah, like I said, sarcastic in nature, right? So a lot of those fights happen with no opportunity for cover. They happen right now, and it does require that proficiency, that draw, and all that kind of stuff. But there is a lot of stuff out there that's gotten drug out of the CQB space versus the street fight. And I will tell you this: there's very little. There's very little that I would compare CQB to like USPSA or most competitions, as far as the principles goes, the tactics go. But USPSA, most competitions out there, you will find many similarities to fighting in a parking lot, open spaces, transitional spaces.
Yes.
A lot of stuff that is very similar. So no matter what you're working on, define the requirements. And I think the tactical community is so lost in that world that they just don't even know what they're training for anymore. Or, we hear, we need higher standards. I hear that from a lot of tactical shooting space guys. Okay, define the task conditions so you can define the standards. You need the task condition and the standards before you can train, right? So I'm going to need you to define task and conditions first. What are the conditions? What are we fighting in? Well, we don't know. We're just shooting a cardboard target at 357, 10, 15, or 25 yards, right? And we're trying to get fast bill drills or whatever the most famous tactical shooter dude put on Instagram yesterday. That's our new standards for the week. It's not how we train. Backwards planning, right? Define your goal, the requirements it's going to take to get you to that goal, and then you have to plan backwards to where you are at so you can define the time that it's going to take for you to get there, being realistically, right? There's that old acronym when trying to achieve goals. SMART. You have to be specific, manageable,
Articulable.
achievable,
I never heard of it.
realistic, and intangible, right? The SMART approach to defining and achieving goals. It's not a bad approach, but most people simply don't know how to train. They're not defining their requirements.
And there's nothing wrong with some of those drills, like the build drill with the L press, but we more use them as like a self-assessment. So what's a build drill? Draw and shoot 6 rounds. If your draw is 1.8 and your splits are half a second and your shots are just drifting all over the place, like there's things you need to work on and train on. We don't just keep repeating the build drill as a training method. All right, so your draw sucks. Why? You're not getting your hand to the gun quick enough. Your shots are not in control on your follow-up shots. Why? What's going on with your grip? So you can use those drills to create a self-assessment and see what you need to work on, but just repeating them isn't specifically training. For the L Pres, all right, draw, shoot 2, 2, 2, reload 2, 2, 2. Hey, what's a transition look like from target A to B? Maybe 0.25 to 0.35. If you get someone who's taking 0.8 to get from that target to the next target right over, so 0.8 seconds between those two shots, what's going on with them? Why are they floating the gun, moving the gun so slow? Then you can address it. So
the transition.
So those drills do have a purpose to help identify some deficiencies and show people what you're trying to look at. But it's not like the end all be all.
I call someone who goes to the range and they shoot a drill, and we don't use the word drill anymore, right? Because a drill should develop a skill. So El Presidente is not a drill; it is an exercise because
It's like a test.
Well, it's an exercise if you just do it, right? But if you use it as an evaluation, an eval, right? Well, now you shoot El Pres, right? Turn and draw, shoot 3 targets with 2 rounds each, reload 3 targets, 2 rounds each. Well, now I can take that shot timer and you say, okay, well, your turn and draw, you got your first round out and it was an alpha, right? And well, screw it. Let's say it was a delta. Your first round was a delta, and your turn and first shot was 1.7 seconds. Okay, well, we need to work on that skill. First off, we probably need to evaluate just your draw without a turn. Now let's do the skill of draw and turning and get that down to 1 second flat or 1.1 or something, or even faster, right?
Yeah.
You use these evaluation, these exercises to highlight what skill the shooter actually needs to work on. So if they're just pop 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 pop, chunky clunky reload, pop 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 pop, and you say, okay, well that took you 8 seconds. Let's shoot it faster. Typically, all that happens is they literally just pull the trigger faster. So now it's pop 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 pop. The transition gets no faster, which is where the real time and money is made up on an exercise like that, because there's so many transitions. There's only one draw, right? And what's that old competition saying? It's like splits are for show, transitions are for dough. I kind of changed it a little bit. Like, your shooting needs to take the time it takes. That's driven by your sights. Your sights tell you when to press the trigger. And then movements. Transition is a movement, right? All your movements need to be executed as efficiently as fast as possible, And I just feel like if you shoot with some of the top competition guys, that's where I got everything I just said came from, a nationally ranked, or if not a national champion GM USPSA shooter. We've been lucky to shoot with so many of them, but we sought it out, right? Always seek training from someone better than you, more experienced than you. But when you start breaking those things down and using them as an evaluation, so now you can highlight the exact skills that you need to work on, cool. That now you're training. I asked people the question, when you go to the range, are you training or are you there to have fun? If you're just there to have fun, cool. But when I go to the range, it's typically training. I'm trying to either maintain my skills or get better, and it doesn't have to be fun for me. The average American things need to be fun, and that outranks their need for proficiency and performance, right? You talk to a champion, their training's not fun, and most Americans aren't capable of that. So when tactical shooting community is purveying these super insane high standards, it's just not realistic.
Well, I think a lot of times, people go out and what's fun is, I'm going to shoot this drill I saw on Instagram or whatever, and they're not, like you said, Dustin, they're not using it as a metric or an eval. They're just using it for fun. And if you give me some drill I've never seen before, and you give me an hour or 2 hours to just shoot it like a million times, I'll probably get pretty good at it. Yeah. Not because I got better at the individual components of it, but because I just had the opportunity to just repeat the same thing 30 times. Yeah. It's like, okay, go make a pie, and I've never made a pie before, but if you give me 2 hours to try and, or a bunch of attempts, I'll probably do it without even knowing what I did.
My fastest build drill ever was a 4.28 second build drill with a stock Glock at work with freaking Hydroshock ammo. We didn't know what we were doing. It was before YouTube. It was before Instagrams. We were just out there shooting El President. Somebody on the team brought it up. We went out there and shot it. We shot tens of thousands of tax dollars worth of Hydroshock ammunition. And we were all shooting it in sub 5, but our patterns on these targets were like, like you're shooting a 6-inch barrel 12 gauge at, 100 meters. It was horrible. And then I finally got lucky and burned one down, all alphas and 4.2. Couldn't repeat it, right? So that was my fastest. I was being what I call a drill queen. When you go to the range and you shoot the same damn drill a million times and you finally get lucky, that's the one you post to Instagram. But you can see the targets are all pasted up, right? Yeah. You're a drill queen. That's not, if you can't do it every single time at that pace, it's not real. And when I say every single time, I mean tomorrow and then a week later. And there's a point, right? Like, okay, if you've gotten here and you skip a week, you're not going to lose much. You skip a month, you might lose a little bit. And everybody's different, right? It is a perishable skill. But that's why we talk about being able to do things on demand, not drill queening it. I'd be willing to bet 10 grand, and I don't see all his training, but I'd be willing to bet 10 grand that if you went out to the range after any session that Dustin shot, it wasn't a known drill. It was targets thrown up, or like with me, wherever the target stands are when I get to the range, that's probably where the targets are going. Wherever the steel is when I get there, that's where they're going to remain. And someone else set up my training for me today. So now it's on demand. It's not what I want to do. Most shooters go to the range and do what they want to do, not what they need to do, for two reasons. That's the American way. We like having fun and instant gratification. But also, most people don't know what they need to work on. They have no clue because they don't know how to evaluate their own training, their own performance.
In that vein, I kind of want to go more to depth if someone's looking at this, how they can think, okay, now we've talked about the issues, the things that kind of plague the community. How do I make myself a better trainer, or not trainer, but trainee, I guess, of
Better shooter?
Your own better shooter. There we go.
Okay. So let's define what type of shooter we're talking about. The average self-defense shooter.
So the average person, right? They go out to the range, myself. I go out to the range. I normally do some sort of, the term cold start, where I find some sort of drill I'm going to start with, something I'm not super familiar with. I set it up, and I shoot it. And then I take a look and say, okay, where did I suck? Where did I do good? Okay, let's focus on where I sucked. And then the rest of the day of that range is normally me focusing on what I just sucked on, right?
It's pretty squared away.
And then maybe at the end, then I'll try it again and see if, okay, did I improve?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's my experience. That's the way I'll kind of do things.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do that. They might say, "Where did I suck?" All right, I can't hit these steel at 20 yards, off the draw from this position, whatever. If they are disciplined to say, "I'm going to practice what I suck at," they're not thinking about why they suck at it.
Yeah.
So they think repeat until they get a little bit better at it, and that's training, but they're not looking at why they suck at it. Is it the grip? Is it what they're doing with the trigger? Are they being stressing over a perfect sight picture and tensing up or anticipating a bunch? Most people who come out here who do want to be disciplined, work on their weakness, they just don't know how to figure out what's causing that weakness and fix it. They don't know how to break it down and analyze what is causing that inefficiency or inaccuracy.
How many bodybuilders or powerlifters you know that have a coach?
Most.
Yeah. Right? Most of them. How many track stars have a coach? How many basketball players have a coach? The average shooter does not have a coach. It's just not something in this community. So let's say you go to the range and you're missing that piece of steel at 20 meters, right? Again, you just keep shooting at it till you hit it 5 times in a row. Now you say, woo, I can shoot steel. But you come back 2 days later, you have to go through the same process because you don't know the technique, right? If you don't know the technique, that's where the coach steps in and says, hey, well, let's try this technique to apply to your deficiency.
And sometimes it's so simple. Like, let's even make the most simple thing, a draw. You might see people working on a draw all damn day out here with their buddies, seeing how fast they can get if they have a timer. And they just can't get below 1.4, 1.6, but they're trying, they're going as quick as you can. And then someone who just knows how to coach says, hey, get your damn hand to the gun quicker. Your hand needs to snap to the gun immediately and go from there. And so they might be ripping the gun out of the holster quick and throwing it up there quick, but their initial movement to get into the gun is slow and tentative, and that one thing is half a second, and they just would have never thought of that if they don't have someone with them who knows how to break it down. Simple things like that.
Some people, I try to articulate the idea of be your own best coach, right? Even if you hire a coach and you work with them once a month, they're probably not going to be there for every dry practice session, right? They should give you homework to go work on, right? But, the draw is a very good thing, right? When people think about speeding up their draw, they tend to think about, this part. Well, the problem is if you're still carrying speed when you get the full presentation, you're going to get that reverb. So now you're getting the crappy shots. This part, getting your hand to the gun faster or sooner, is going to mean you're going to get the gun out of the holster sooner. A lot of people still teach this support hand should mate up to the gun where you naturally clap. If I wait to out here to put my support hand on the gun, by the time I get to full presentation, I still won't have a grip. I'm going to outrun myself. So, we talk about get your hand on the gun sooner.
Yep.
because sooner will equate to faster. Get the hand on the gun, get it out of the holster sooner, get your support hand so on the gun sooner so you can have your grip established sooner. So that way, every single time your sights come up in front of your face, it's consistent and repeatable. And you're going to be able to break that shot sooner.
Absolutely.
And that's what a coach does in a discipline. He or she is going to look at their athlete, their shooter in this case, and be able to see those little tiny things that they can improve on and where they're making mistakes. And if they're good, they're going to take it and put it on video and show their shooter, like, all right, look, check this out. As much as I hate doing it, it kind of showed me the value of it. There was a couple of times there earlier in the year, and it was funny because me and Dustin worked together, teaching together for like a year before we actually just did a range session together, right? We were just busy. So we went out and shot together, and we recorded some videos, and we wound up putting screen in screen. So it was comparative. Buzzer went off, and you could see Dustin's strengths, versus my weaknesses, or vice versa, right? And we always joke, that he does some things really well that I don't, and I do some things really well that he don't, and we even out, and we come out within tenths of seconds of each other, or thousandths of seconds of each other. We've had matches that we've shot together that were within tenths of seconds of each other over the whole match. And we can really highlight. So I've been doing that a lot recently. It's like, all right, comparatives. And you don't want to be an asshole as a coach and be like, hey, student, I'm going to compare you to me. But it can be helpful sometimes to have that split screen where the athlete can actually see where someone faster than them or more proficient than them is beating them.
Yeah.
Right? That phone is the best training tool if you're trying to be your own best coach.
Because you could watch a video of Taryn Butler burn it down, but
What's
why
he
is he
doing?
better? What is he doing that makes him better than me?
When you put you next to him, you will be able to see everything he's doing faster than you.
Well, I remember 4 or 5 years ago now, I think one of the first times I messaged you on Instagram is I'd been following you for a while, and I was having an issue shooting at distance. And so I sent you, I was like, I'm having this issue. And you're like, go to the range, shoot, and send me a video. So I sent you a video. My big issue was I was so the click bang thing. I'd wait for the reset, and then I just slam the trigger home, and bullet would go wherever it wanted to. And you saw the video, instantly addressed what it was, and then and that kind of really changed my shooting. And you told me about the whole prep sights press thing, and that really did a lot. And I think a lot of times people have an issue, and I noticed this. I branded the shooter's insanity, right? Where they keep trying the exact same thing over and over again. Right. It's I'll go off the range with my friends, and we'll set up a stage or something, and we'll all do it or something. And there's this one target, and there's missing, and they just keep shooting. I'm like, stop, just stop. Take a second.
You're literally practicing to do it wrong.
Yeah, you're literally just wasting money at this point. Take a second, think through. I'm like, look at your sights, see what you're doing, and then consciously make the decision. Because I think a lot of times it gets to the point where you've been shooting all day, you're tired, or whatever. And people are just like, oh fuck it, I'll swing it. And they're just wasting ammo. And like you said, they're practicing the doing it wrong.
I was just out in Washington State, and a tactical shooter that was there, his eval at the end of it was like, man, I have not ever heard anyone in our space just stomp up and down about watching your sights. Let your sights be your guide. Your sights tell you everything you need to know. We preach that because no matter how proficient you are, how much time you take off, when you pull that gun up, your sights will tell you when you can hit the trigger. Gun goes off, sights will tell you when you can hit the trigger. And if you make a mistake or you change your grip as you're pressing the trigger, if you can call your sights, which means seeing what your sights are doing as the gun goes off, right, you're going to be able to fix those mistakes. You're going to be able to shoot on demand, whether you spend 5 days away from the gun or 5 years away from the gun. We really talk about concepts first and then technique second. If a shooter understands conceptually what they're trying to achieve, the big picture, if you will, the little baby techniques, because there are a bunch of techniques, right? Grip. I like the whole upside down horseshoe thing. There are so many dudes out there that teach push-pull that can outshoot me, who are better than me. So many people, right? So I tell people, here's a couple of options. Let's see what works best for you, But conceptually, we're not trying to control recoil with grip. That's what most people say. Your grip is for controlling recoil. First of all, you can't control recoil, right? It's going to be there no matter how strong you are with your grip. What you're actually doing with a good grip is allowing for more efficient realignment of the sights. That's your ultimate goal. But most people teach grip as a thing that controls recoil. I don't care. That's not what I say. Your goal, and it's conceptual, is to get those sights realigned so you can shoot. Is that some recoil management? Yes, so those sights come back predictably and consistently so you can shoot. But the goal of grip, a good, high master grip or whatever we're calling it these days, it's a grip, dude. Do we have to add another adjective to that word?
You got to make it tactical.
Right. Purchase, your master purchase. Like, what are we on Amazon? Like, it's a grip, dude. Anyway.
And when he's talking about, preaching, let your sights tell you when to shoot, we're not talking about having to have the absolute perfect sight picture or having to have your dot perfectly still. We're talking about not combining movement with the shot by not finishing what movement you were doing to get that gun on the target before firing the shot. So, avoiding breaking the shot while you're still moving into position before the gun stops off the draw and everything. Because for most of what we're talking about, getting a centered zone hit on 5, 10, 15 meters out, like you have a lot you can get away with in a sight picture. You have a lot of wobble that you can get away with if you have a dot on your gun, and you're still going to have pretty effective combat shooting. And and if you want to talk about competition, the A zone's pretty damn big.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about let your sights tell you when to shoot, as in like make sure you've got that perfect sight picture and shoot. We're just saying, figure out your rhythm, figure out your timing, make sure that gun is stopping on that target and pulling the trigger, stopping on the next target, pulling the trigger, and finding more and more ways to improve your efficiency and speed during that movement and stopping it. Because when it comes time for me to pull the trigger, or you to pull the trigger, or someone brand new to pull the trigger, like my trigger press is not any faster or slower than anyone else. It's everything leading up to that.
Right.
So,
Well, and like acceptable sight picture,
Yeah.
that type of stuff comes. I'm not a big fan of teaching people perfect sights and sight. I show them, kind of what you can get away with, or another way of saying is acceptable sight picture, right? So like, we show folks, if you take iron sights and move the gun over where only half the front sight post is obscured by one of the rears, or half the front sight post above the tops of the rears or below or whatever, when it's about half of that front sight post, you're still getting all A zone hits out to about 5 meters on most guns. It's according to how fat the sights are, or the sight radius. There's little variables in there, but for the most part, if you've got half a front sight post in that notch at 5 meters and in, you're getting excellent hits. So we like to present that to folks so they understand, like, hey, let your sights tell you when you press the trigger. Let that be your guiding thing. If you can do that, you're going to be a good shooter. Another thing we talked about yesterday that is very common that I don't really agree with, and I subscribed to it for a long time. And it's probably partly right, but let's add some standards, some rules, if you will. The whole concept of shoot until the wheels fall off, right? Add speed until you throw around. Well, that's pretty vague, isn't it? But it's common. We've all heard it before, right? We're going to train, we're going to add speed until we completely fall apart. To me, that is training to do something incorrectly. So like with my lifters and my runners and all that kind of stuff, I wanted them to be able to put weights on the bar. Let's say we're squatting. If they missed or failed, there was ramifications. There was consequence for failing. So, in other words, they said, hey, I'm getting a PR today. I'm going to add 20 more pounds to what I did last week. And they unrack the bar and it buries them.
I've been there.
Right? Well, that's just immature. That's immature. You made a decision based off of ego and an unrealistic goal, right? Smart or realistic. You just went unrealistic. You're not adding 20 pounds to, if you're a trained athlete, right? You might, if it's, last week was your first time ever squatting, you might add 20 pounds.
Yeah.
You're a trained athlete, right? You got a 500-pound squat and you've been squatting for 5 years, right? You're trained. You're not throwing 20 pounds on 1 week later. You might throw on 2 pounds, 1 pound each side. That's being realistic. So when I hear folks say, hey, I'm just going to shoot until I shoot faster and the wheels just fly off. No, absolutely not. You want to train right up into the edge with tiny increments, and that's it. Not until you throw a round off a full-size IPSC target. Now you might say, okay, let's go back to defining our standards. In our training today, we're doing maintenance. Well, to me, in a maintenance training phase, that means all alphas. You will not shoot a Charlie. It's maintenance. You already know how to shoot alphas, right? And I show this to people all the time. Like, there's a target in a competition, right? And you shoot a Charlie Delta. It's at 10 meters. Take that same target, same height, at 10 meters, remove all the other variables, and just have you start right here, okay, with no time, no buzzer, no nothing. Give me 2 alphas on that target. Pow, pow, 2 alphas. Well, then why did you miss it in that competition? Because your movement, right, or your lack of maturity, you're on watching the sights. What are they calling it now? Visual patience is a new thing. Hey, man, you pulled the trigger before your sights were on the alpha. Or you pulled the trigger and moved the gun off the alpha. One or the others. That's it. All misses are one thing. The sights were not on your intended target when the gun went off. That's it, right? Of course, for every internet insta arguing type fussy whiny boy, well, what if my red dot wasn't zeroed? Shut up.
Zero your
Right?
red dot thing.
Right. It's an implied task to zero your gun before you shoot it. If your gun is not zeroed and you're missing, you're not mature enough to be in this conversation, right? No. So when you say, okay, for me, when I'm in a developmental phase, I will start allowing Charlies. Is that to say that in my maintenance phase, I won't throw one every now and then? Well, certainly.
But the difference is, like, we usually knew why we throw one.
Right.
Yeah.
If we want to work on getting the gun up a little bit quicker coming into this position, okay, I broke that one too quick. I think it went over the shoulder or something. You know, at least if you're going to push it until you start having some acceptable hits, like you still need to see the sights on every shot and know what happened. See, I really want to push transitions as hard as I can from here to here. Okay, I pulled off that too early. You know, I'll fix that in the next one. But just shooting like to a reckless point,
Out of control?
Yeah.
and hoping you hit something. If you don't, you know, it's just.
Well, I think going to that level of shooting, if you let's say you're trying to push yourself and you have an instructor there who's like saying who's pushing you, and they're monitoring what you're doing, or you're at the level where you can call your misses and you can call your hits. Like if I go back 3 years ago, I could shoot something and I feel really good about it, and then I'd look at all my hits and be like, this is terrible. It felt really good when I was doing it, but I look at it now, like when we shot yesterday. I wouldn't say every time, but a majority of the time when I would get a Charlie, or you know I'd throw one, just get a full on mic, or even like my footwork, I'm like, oh, I just drop stepped, right? Especially after we had that conversation, it's like I just felt it every time, right? So you kind of get this idea. It's like, okay, I know I'm pushing myself, and I felt my mistakes,
right? So
you can learn from them. But if you can't understand your mistakes, you're just wasting time.
You know, we're like the overall training, right? And again, you know, this is coming from any type of training, right? It doesn't matter what discipline you're in. And this is, I always use this example. How often does the average really into it type self-defense shooter shoot? Once a month is about what I get from people. And this is the guy that's got a Gucci Glock. He's got a belt. He's got kit. Might even have some plates. He's got all the stuff and the things. And I'm like, well, how often do you shoot? And they're like, you know, I try to get in the range twice a month, but it's, you know, a lot of times it's once a month. And okay, yeah. I'm like, well, how often do you dry fire? I don't really. Okay. Imagine this. I just signed us up for a marathon 8 months from today. And we're going to run once a month for that marathon. What? That sounds absurd, doesn't
I'll start the funeral arrangements.
Right, it sounds absurd. Like, we know by the end of mile 2, we're all going to be sucking. We're going to walk 24 out of 26 of those miles. We might run across the finish line for a photo, right? But that's kind of my point with shooters is there's no structure to their training, and there's no basis for their training. If you want to find that, you got to go to like Scott Anderson's book. You know, you got to go find the competition shooters. They have methods for training to get better. It's progressive, you know, progression with corrections. term I got from Bill Drummond, right? You know, a former champion. The average shooter really thinks that they can go to the range and get better by doing it once a month with no dry practice. And that's absurd. Like I said, you want to do a marathon 8 months from now, but you only ran 8 times? That's insane, right? And the average person understands that, whether they're a marathon runner or not, right? They understand that. So when you think about it like that, like perspective, man, it matters. Perception is reality. So when you present it to people like that, it makes them realize, like, oh, wow, I have really been approaching this all wrong. How I can't possibly get better if all I do is go to the range. Even if you go to the range once a month and you shoot 500 rounds, if you're not training well with task condition standards, how can you get better? I don't know that it's possible.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah.
So I think we're gonna wrap up. I always like to end every episode with a kind of a question I'll pose to the audience. So I think talked a lot about training and things. What do you if we look at communities, right? You know, this is the term, the 2A, the gun community, or however you want to phrase it. You look at all these other communities. You could say rival communities or enemy community, however you want to term it, like the Antifa or BLM or LGBT, however many letters are in that now. They are more cohesive communities than the Second Amendment community. We are so split and fragmented. Every time one person makes one little mistake or says one little thing wrong, it is a feeding frenzy, and it's all the piranhas come out. So
unless you're a female shooter, and then you can be absolutely horrible, and in the comments there's a bunch of dudes saying how awesome you are.
That's because they're sis. But what do you think are the main issues or the main things plaguing the 2A community? What do we need to improve upon? So
simple doesn't sell, and this goes for like a lot of communities too. So that's one of the main problems. People want to invent new shit, over-explain stuff. They want to make a pistol level 1, 2, 4, tactical pistol level, basic, advanced, and just overcomplicate everything. Like, we are happy if someone comes to one of our courses. We teach them everything we know about pistol in one day, and mainly teach them how to continue to use that information to progress in the future. Because we can't make you better in one day. We can show you all the things that it takes to go better. We don't want to sell like additional courses. If you want to come back for something specific, like, hey, I shot 4 USPSA matches, I really want to work on footwork, then yeah, we'll run something specific. But we don't try to run different levels of courses, and I think that's the problem. People want to overcomplicate things, structure some multi-tier things, reinvent the wheel, try to look cool. Most of what's on social media is entertainment now, not training. All the biggest influences on there are just entertaining. You don't learn anything from shooting any of them. And again, basics doesn't sell, and I think basic and effective, I don't want to say basic like low level, I mean like perfecting the fundamentals doesn't sell, and that's the problem. People want to try to argue and outdo each other and overcomplicate and reinvent and rename things and get busy arguing about it. That's the problem.
It's like, how often do you see a sprinter? It's like, oh well, today I'm gonna sprint, but I'm also gonna climb a tree and like jump off a bridge and like add all. It's like, no, they just sprint. Like, I used to do cross country and track. When if you did the 400 meter, you just did the 400 meter and that's it. You didn't right. You might warm up or something, but it's not tomorrow. You're not gonna I'm gonna just do hurdles just for the fun of it. It's like, why? Right. You're just going to injure yourself or look stupid.
Yeah, so to me, it's everything he just said, and then he started to hit on it, social media. Social media is the best thing that's ever happened to the world, and at the exact same time, the worst thing. So that would certainly apply to this so-called 2A community. Well, if you look up the definition of community, there is no such thing as a 2A community. It doesn't exist, right? It just doesn't exist. So on social media, right, it's a place where anyone can say anything they want without any ramifications. I mean, just the other day, some dude called him soft for blocking him. This was a person.
And here's why he got blocked. No real profile picture, not one post, a fake name. I'm like, I'm not going to argue with this dude who doesn't even have a real profile. Like, I don't know who he is. It's like,
so me and him,
if I know who you are and you want to critique me, fine. Yeah. We can go back and forth. But if you've got a fake profile, no shooting content, not even one post, and you want to shoot, I probably would have blocked the guy anyway. I don't like
Well,
accounts for
right?
So
Like if you come into my home, to my yard, and you disrespect me, I'm probably going to ask you to leave, right? We are both mature adults, mostly mature adults. I mean, we all have our times and our spaces where we act, freaking irresponsibly, certainly. If you're an asshole to me, I'm probably going to be an asshole back to you at some level, even on the internet, especially when it's somebody who isn't willing to go face to face.
Yeah.
Right? They can say whatever they want. So the 2A community is so plagued by that. You got some guy that says, hey, this. And then you got another guy that says, oh, you're an idiot, freaking. And I'm like, why don't you guys just go to the range and shoot? You might find out that you're both doing the same stuff and you just use different words to describe it.
Yep.
But the whole thing about the internet, it is the worst thing about the second A community, right? Like, for one, I just now came to this conclusion that, our generation, we see the internet as a place to exchange information. Generations just below us, 10 years younger than us, probably your generation, you guys see the internet as a real thing. It's like real. So guys are like, oh, well, if you block me, right, you're a pussy and you're trying to censor me. Not, I don't have time for you.
Yeah.
I'm only here to give information to people that want it. I don't want them distracted in my comments by your disrespectful tone. And that's why a lot of
It's like
times...
if you had someone show up to a class, there was like an asshole.
You're leaving.
Yelling at
Right?
them.
I'm
It's
going
like,
to tell you
all
to
right,
leave.
get the fuck out.
Right. You're being disrespectful in my space.
Yeah.
I block you not because I'm soft or I'm afraid of what you're saying. I don't like what you're saying, and I don't have to entertain it on my space.
Not worth the time.
I don't go to other people's pages and say asshole shit.
Yeah.
If I happen to comment on someone else's page, I'm trying to be helpful or maybe funny. But, the few times I have gone to other people's and it wasn't received well, I just said, screw it, quit pretty much commenting on other people's pages unless it is nothing but a compliment.
Yeah.
I don't have time to get on the web and be an asshole to people. I don't have time for it.
if I've got a video running a drill with an AR and someone wants to leave a comment and says, where you have your arm, that's not going to be comfortable for most people. That doesn't work for, whatever. Then fine, that's a cool comment. That's his opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some validity in it. If someone gets on and says that's a fucked up way to hold an AR, like, I'm not even going to debate the guy. Like, bye, block.
So
come shoot with me. Or like you take my time to put out a free video on how to do something, and you got some asshole who's like, I can't believe you're running a Holosun, that Chinese piece of shit. Or they ding on a piece of equipment. Like, you clearly don't know me because I don't give a damn about equipment. I just want it to work.
Well, how you even going to move in those jeans? Like, yeah.
Well, your tight jeans.
Great draw.
Yeah.
That's useless if you can't move in your tight jeans. Like,
and I'm like, obviously, you've never seen the dude run in tight jeans. The dude's fast as hell,
Well, it's interesting. So I have a buddy of mine, Brett. He has a YouTube channel, Nightwood Guns, and he's reached the point where if someone tries to critique his shooting, he's a really good shooter. Like, I went and shot him just a couple months ago, and I was like I'd shoot something, then he'd shoot something, and I'd be like, okay, well, I guess I'm just terrible. Like, it's like that that level of difference when someone else shoots something, and he's been shooting since he's like a kid. Like, he was a competent shooter as a child. So I don't know if you guys know, like, the Tier 1 concealed 3.7s drill. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of it. I don't know what it is.
So it's
we were
talking about it.
It's a pretty hard drill. I have
the small circles, right?
Yeah, you small circles. You get 7.
Really
I haven't passed it yet.
You get a coin if you do. It's really hard. He's passed it, right, repeatedly. He can do it on demand, right? He can pass it, and maybe not always beat his best time, but on demand. So you'll just say, okay, do that drill, send me a video, and then I'll talk to you. That's what he's gotten to now.
Really?
Because he's gotten to that level of amount of subscribers and viewers where it's like he doesn't have the time. If someone's going to critique, hey, I disagree about this piece of gear or whatever, okay, let's have that discussion. But if it's like, hey, your shooting's bad, okay, shoot this drill, do it.
You want to have a discussion with me? I'm open for it.
Yeah.
Open for it. If you are a disrespectful asshole to me, the chances are I'm going straight to, hey, swing by. We'll go out behind the freaking house and sort it out like grown men.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that we're not used to.
Everyone
Is
freaks
a
out.
lot of your generation, they're like, oh my God, you threatened someone. Like, I don't see it that way.
It's an invite.
I've given you an opportunity to get very intimate with me. It's not something I offer everyone, right? But I was also raised in the world that, you shut the hell up and don't disrespect somebody, for no reason. And if you do, and there's someone that could, stomp your guts out, then you better be willing to accept the consequence.
Yeah.
Right? There's a reason why I don't go on Chuck Liddell's Instagram page and critique Chuck Liddell's freaking, crazy right hand. You know what I mean? Like, by all striking methods, right? Like, Chuck Liddell's crazy overhand right hand is like, you can't do it. But it worked for Chuck Liddell, and it put many a dude to sleep, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's twofold. A, it worked. He proved it. But B, I'm not talking shit to Chuck Liddell because he'll hurt me. You know what I mean? Like, so I watch my mouth.
So, let's say, Tim Kennedy, right? I disagree with a lot of things with Tim Kennedy.
A lot of people do.
I would in no way ever say anything to his face or anything because he would just murder.
Literally hurt you.
Yes.
Like, he could kill you.
I've seen him beat the shit out of people. So it's like, I don't want to deal with that.
Right.
I could outshoot him, but if he wants to beat my ass is gone.
Right. Like, have some respect for the dude and his career and the things he's accomplished. And if he says something you disagree with, well, you have that option of just keep swiping.
Yeah. Well, I think people get so what they believe when it comes to shooting, politics, identity, whatever, is their identity.
Right.
It's like, oh, you disagree with me? Well, you've personally insulted me to my core, and I have to make it my life's mission to convince you otherwise. And then otherwise, you're basically a Satanist in my view, right? It's like it's that extreme. And I think it's things like that. And then these are the other issues I see for me in the 2A community: athleticism and discipline. Right? You have people who want to talk about, oh, you got to be able to do this, that, and the third, these standards, whatever. But they're 300 pounds. They can't get out of bed. Mm-hmm. They run 5 meters and they're out of breath.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, and you also have to have the discipline to, like we're saying, if you're bad at something, do that. Like, it sucks. It sucks to do the thing you're bad at.
Right.
It really sucks. Like, for a long time, like transitions, I was really bad at transitions.
Fucking that rooster.
It wants to add its 2 cents. It's talking about the things it doesn't like about the 2A community. Yeah. But I was really bad at transitions, and
I got to cut it soon anyway.
So, anyways, point being, there's things you suck at, and you got to be able to. You have the discipline to do them, and I think it's a big ego thing where people don't. All right, and on that note, we're gonna call it good. All right, Dustin, where can people find you? Where can people follow you? See your content.
DV Rademacher, but most of the content that applies to both of us out here is at Capable Inc. So DV.Rademacher on Instagram. I'm not going to spell it, but you can find me tagged on most of the...
He can't even spell his own last name.
Yeah. All right, people
when I have to spell his last name, I have to sound it out.
If I spelled it, people would be debating me how I should spell it. So.
Probably.
Yeah, so anyway, I'm tagged in most of the Capable Inc. stuff on the Capable Inc. page.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Tony, where can people find you, follow you, all that good stuff?
Same deal. Tony_Cowden_, I think. And then Capable_INC.
All right.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having us on.
Oh,
man.
absolutely. Thanks.
It's always a pleasure shooting with you, brother.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned.